There are moments in life when the silence around us is deafening. You look around and realize there's no one cheering you on, no one holding your hand, no one saying, "It's going to be okay." And it's in that emptiness that most people give up. And it's exactly there that your strength is born. Because moving forward when everyone is by your side is easy. True power shows up when you keep going, even when you're alone. Moving forward isn't about ignoring the pain, but about turning it into direction. It's understanding that loneliness isn't always punishment. Sometimes it's the training ground the universe uses to prepare you for the next level. And when you get through that phase, something shifts inside you. Fear becomes courage, and neediness becomes self-reliance. You don't need anyone to push you, validate you, or walk with you. You just need to remember who you are. If this message already resonates with something inside you, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and stick with me, because now you're going to learn how to move forward, even when the path feels like it's yours alone. Step 1. Accept that support won't always come from where you expect. One of the hardest parts of the journey is realizing not everyone will come along. Sometimes the person you most expected to stand by you is the one who pulls away, and that hurts. I went through it when I decided to change my life. I expected encouragement, but found silence. The messages slowed down, the invitations stopped, and suddenly the path felt empty. At first, I thought I was doing something wrong. But over time, I realized it wasn't rejection. It was redirection. Support isn't always close by. Sometimes it comes in the form of intuition, faith, or a sign that shows up at just the right time. The mistake is thinking loneliness means abandonment. In reality, it's the space between your old self and your new one. It's the period when life removes what no longer fits, to make room for what will make you stronger. Strong women don't feed on other people's approval. They're fueled by the clarity of who they're becoming. Comment, "I don't need an audience to keep going." That phrase marks the turning point between the fear of being alone and the power of being whole. Step 2. Turn solitude into a source of strength, not pity. Solitude can be the most dangerous place, or the most transformative. It all depends on how you choose to live in it. I learned that during one of the quietest phases of my life, when it felt like no one saw me. I looked for distractions to avoid feeling the emptiness. Social media, shallow conversations, anything to make me forget I was alone. Until one day I'd had enough. I shut everything off, sat on the floor and cried. Not because I wanted attention, but because I finally accepted. I was with myself, and that had to be enough. That's when everything changed. I started using the silence to listen to myself, not to punish myself. I found that solitude, when experienced with awareness, is a mirror. It shows you your shadows, but also reveals your strength. And the more comfortable you become with being alone, the more selective you are with who you let in afterward. Women who move forward even when they're alone understand this. Isolation is not the end, it's the forge. That's where the soul builds muscle. Comment, "Solitude strengthens me. It doesn't break me." That phrase is your reminder that your power begins the moment you stop running from yourself. Step 3. Choosing to keep going, even without guarantees. Moving forward when everything is uncertain takes a kind of faith that can't be taught. It has to be built. It's looking into the unknown and taking the first step even when you can't see the ground. I went through this when I decided to completely change the direction of my life. I had no safety net, no guarantee it would work. All I had was a feeling screaming inside me. I can't stay here anymore. And that discomfort became my compass. In those early days, fear was constant. I kept asking myself, what if I fail? What if no one supports me? Until I realized failing would be not trying at all. Because waiting to feel ready is the perfect trap to never move. Women who walk alone know courage isn't the absence of fear. It's the decision to go, even while shaking. When you choose to move forward without guarantees, the universe shifts. Answers show up, the right people cross your path, and what once seemed impossible begins to take shape. You don't need to see the end of the road. You just need to trust the next step. Moving forward alone isn't just an emotional act. It's also an act of awareness. Because when everything seems to fall apart, one of the first things we feel slipping out of our control is our finances. And that's where many women get stuck. Not because they're incapable, but because they don't feel secure. How many times have you wanted to start over, but the fear of instability held you back? How many times have you stayed in places that hurt you just because you believed you couldn't afford your freedom? It's painful to realize that financial dependence can trap even the strongest souls. But here's what few people tell you. Freedom and self-confidence walk hand in hand. And once you truly understand that, everything changes. Because money stops being a burden and becomes a bridge. That's why I created the Wealth Code. This guide is a simple, deep, and transformational path to rebuild your relationship with money, awaken your power to thrive, and create the lightness of choosing your own way. It's a real and accessible method, designed for women who want to live with security, purpose, and independence, without needing anyone else to feel complete. Because moving forward is also about having a foundation, and when you master that foundation, you no longer fear being alone, because you know your power is, and always has been, within you. If you're ready to change your life and start building your financial freedom, the link to the Wealth Code is in the first pinned comment. Step 4. Turning pain into direction. Every woman who has ever had to start over alone knows pain is inevitable, but suffering is a choice. The difference between those who stop and those who move forward lies in how they use what they've felt. Some let the pain define them, others let it guide them. I learned this during one of the hardest seasons of my life, when it felt like everything I loved was falling apart. I spent days trying to understand why. Why did that happen? Why did people change? Why did I feel so empty? Until one day, tired of all the questions, I stopped asking why and started asking what for. And that change in wording changed everything. I stopped seeing pain as punishment and started seeing it as a teacher. It was showing me what I'd been ignoring, how strong I really was, how much I could rely on myself, how much I still had left to build. Pain is the map to transformation. When you understand that, it loses its power to paralyze you. Women who keep moving forward don't run from what they feel. They turn what they feel into fuel. Comment: my pain became direction. That phrase marks the shift when suffering stops being a weight and starts becoming momentum. Step 5. Create movement even without motivation. The truth is, no one feels inspired all the time. Waiting for motivation to act is like waiting for the wind to always blow in your favor. Women who keep going, even on their own, have learned that it's not motivation that creates movement. It's movement that sparks motivation. I learned that the hard way. After a major loss, I just stopped. Everything felt meaningless. I'd wake up, look around, and think, what's the point? Until one day, I decided to get up, take a shower, leave the house, and go for a walk. Not because I felt like it, not because I had the strength. I just did it. It was a short walk, but it changed everything. That simple act of moving shook my body out of its numbness, and little by little my mind began to follow. I realized that sometimes what saves you isn't a grand plan, but the next small step. Movement heals. It breaks the cycle of apathy, reignites hope, and reminds you that you're still alive. Women who keep going learn that the secret isn't wanting to move, it's creating rhythm. Comment: I move even without motivation. That phrase marks the beginning of your return to life, a reminder that continuing is, more often than not, the greatest act of faith there is. Step 6. Learn to be your own company. There comes a moment when you realize it's not about who stayed, it's about who you became when you had to walk alone. Learning to be your own company is one of the greatest acts of emotional maturity. And although it may feel lonely, it's in that space that true self-confidence is born. I remember a time when my life revolved around being surrounded by people. I ran from silence because it made me think, and thinking hurt. Until one day, life forced me to stop. Friends drifted away, distractions vanished, and I found myself, literally, with myself. At first, it was uncomfortable. But after a while, I began to rediscover myself. I did things alone I never imagined. I went to a cafe, I traveled, I walked at sunset just listening to my breath, and I realized that for the first time I was enough for myself. Women who keep going, even when alone, have learned to be their own home. They comfort themselves, listen to themselves, and support themselves emotionally. When you become your own best company, you never feel alone again, just whole. Comment: I am enough, and I hold space for myself. That phrase represents the rebirth of your emotional self-sufficiency, the moment when emptiness gives way to presence. Step 7. Relearn to trust life. When everything falls apart and you find yourself alone, it's easy to think you're being punished, but often you're actually being guided. Sometimes life has to leave you without support to teach you how to trust again, not in people, but in the flow. I realized this during a phase when nothing made sense. Plans crumbled, friendships shifted, paths closed. I kept asking, why is everything going wrong? But what looked like chaos was just redirection. One day, without understanding, I decided to stop resisting. Instead of trying to control everything, I started to observe. And I saw that what seemed like loss was actually making room for the new. That what left was, in truth, setting me free. When I learned to trust, life started aligning in ways I could never have planned. Women who move forward alone trust the timing of things. They don't force, don't beg, don't chase. They flow. And in that flow, what's meant for them finds its way back. To trust is to release the fear of falling and discover that the ground forms beneath your feet as you walk. Comment, I trust the timing of my life. That phrase marks the moment you stop fighting what is and start walking in peace with who you are becoming. Step 8. Choose to believe in yourself every day. When you're alone, doubt becomes a constant voice. It asks if it's worth it, if you're capable, if you're heading in the right direction. And if you're not careful, that voice takes over. Women who keep going have learned how to shield themselves from it, not because they never doubt, but because they choose to believe in themselves one more time, every single day. I remember a phase when that voice paralyzed me. I had ideas, dreams, plans, but before I even tried, I had already convinced myself it wouldn't work. One day, out of strength, I wrote a simple sentence on a piece of paper. I believe in myself, even when no one else does. I stuck it on the wall and read it every day. It seemed like a small gesture, but it was the beginning of my rebuilding. With time, I realized that believing in yourself isn't a feeling, it's a practice. It's choosing yourself again, especially when the world overlooks you. Women who rebuild their lives on their own understand. Faith in yourself is a fuel no absence can extinguish. Comment, I choose to believe in myself every day. That phrase is a reminder that your strength doesn't come from outside approval, but from the quiet decision to keep believing, even on cloudy days. Step 9. Learn to start over as many times as needed. Moving forward alone means accepting the road won't be a straight line. There will be days when you take 3 steps forward and 2 steps back. There will be moments when fear feels bigger than courage. But women who truly rebuild themselves understand that starting over is not a sign of weakness. It's a sign of persistence. I had to start over many times. Relationships, projects, plans, everything seemed to fall apart just when I thought I had things under control. Each fall left scars, but also lessons. Until one day I realized it wasn't the end. It was just another chapter. Starting over, in truth, is life's way of saying, there's still more inside you. I began to see each restart as a second chance to do better, with more awareness, more maturity, and more peace. And I understood that the secret isn't avoiding falls. It's learning to rise without losing yourself in the process. Strong women don't wait for the perfect scenario to start again. They build it from what's left. Comment, I can start over as many times as needed. That phrase represents the power of someone who isn't afraid of the new, and knows that true success is the courage to try again, with a peaceful heart. Step 10. Make solitude a starting point, not an end. There comes a point in the journey when solitude stops being pain and becomes power. That's when you realize silence isn't emptiness, it's space. And that space is the fertile ground where the new you begins to grow. Women who keep going, even with no one by their side, have discovered they don't need to be saved, only awakened. I realized this on an ordinary day, after a long season of losses. I was tired of waiting for someone to understand me, for something to change, for life to rescue me. And then I understood. I was the only one who could save myself. The solitude that once weighed me down became my starting point. I began using the time alone to grow stronger, to learn, to rebuild. I discovered that what seemed like the end was actually the beginning of a new version of me, calmer, more selective, and above all, freer. Solitude teaches you how to be whole. And when you learn to be whole, no one can break you again. Comment, I make my solitude a new beginning. That phrase symbolizes the moment when isolation stops being a wound and becomes personal power. Moving forward, and even alone, isn't about being immune to pain. It's about trusting that pain won't stop you from growing. It's accepting that support may fail, that people may leave, but you are still enough. Accepting, transforming pain, moving without motivation, being your own company, trusting timing, believing in yourself, starting over, and finally making solitude the soil for your rebirth. That's how you begin to bloom again. You don't need anyone to walk with you. You just need to remember that the path has always been within you. If this message spoke to what your heart needed to hear, leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and write in the comments. I choose to keep going, even alone. Because once you learn to walk alone, no one can stop you.